Hello everyone, another Xenta machine has arrived that I am building for someone. It is the Xenta MT desktop with the Ryzen 3 Pro 4350G, but only with 8GB of RAM. Very cheap machine. This whole setup is costing, with Windows license and various other things and a monitor, 600 quid. So it's a pretty good deal. It is going to be used as a base for a gaming machine. Of course, with that 8GB of RAM, it's going to struggle. Plus, this is very slow RAM, so let's take it out of the box and have a look inside and see what I'm planning to do with this today. So the Xenta MT Ryzen 3 Pro 4350G, pretty basic, pretty much the same as the previous Xenta I looked at. I've already taken the side off. Though there was no foam screws in the back of this one. But inside, a very different setup in here. So, sorry for the non-tripod shot. But here's the inside of it. As you can see, it's a little different to the 4750G. They have put the Wi-Fi card in the correct slot now, which is great. This being an 8GB machine, it was only supposed to come with one stick of RAM, but it's come with two. Unfortunately, it has been installed in the wrong slots. Interestingly, the grey slot is open, so that RAM stick's installed in the black slot, needs to move to the grey slot to get dual channel mode. So it's nice they included two, but kind of scuppered it up by not actually putting the right slots. No horrible LED fan now. We've got one from Cooler Master, which should hopefully behave a little better. Had some strange issues with that one before. It is only 3-pin, but in DC mode it should work, unlike the previous fan. Power supply is exactly the same as before, 300 watt maximum, but obviously watch out for that 240 watt. So you're limited to a 75 watt card. So GTX 1650 non-OC version is about the highest you can go. And that's right. For those of you that are wondering, before I carry on, here's the power supply out of the other machine. Decent fan inside, so the cooling's okay, but the connectors obviously are your standard ATX, your CPU, and it does come with a PCI Express 6-pin. So for those who are wondering, it does come with one. Wouldn't recommend using it, but it does come with one. So those who are wondering, that can you plug a graphics card into this machine? Yes, you can. I would not recommend it at all, because you're going to be right up against your physical budget for the PSU, and that's when things go bang. And that's about it, really. Obviously the SSD is your 240GB affair. This one is from Seagate. But other than that, it's all pretty much exactly the same as the 4050G. Just, I think this is slightly better put together, really. Apart from that RAM, that's a bit silly, but I was only expecting single channel anyway, because it was advertised as a single stick. It's coming out anyway, because faster RAM needs to go in here, as you will see in a moment. This machine really has been bought for a gaming machine, because there's a lack of graphics cards and everything available at the moment. So the plan was to use this as the base and use the onboard graphics just to tide the person over. But with that RAM, as you will see in a moment, its game performance is pretty dire. Though with the dual channel mode, it might be a little better than I'm expecting, but it's pretty dire overall. And what's going in here is some 3200 MHz RAM to increase the speed of the graphical performance, and then this machine is good to go. A graphics card will be going in here possibly in a couple of months, possibly a GTX 1650 when they're back in stock. But in the interim, this is what's going to happen, and it's going to need various upgrades in the future, which I'm discussing with the client. So it's going to need a new hard drive, well, bigger hard drive probably, as for game storage, and possibly more RAM, and that PSU is going to have to go, because that isn't going to last very long. But it will do for the time being. So let's put this all back together, install Windows on it, and let's have a look at the game performance then, shall we? First, some CPU performance. It's on par around about the i7 7700K. If you want to see more on more CPU benchmarks and various things, post the card in the top right corner. But CPU wise, there is more enough grunt here for all your gaming needs, really, unless you're doing something like 4K and a bit ridiculous. But for budget gaming, perfectly fine. But let's have a look at some benchmarks then. So this is in 3D Mark using the slow RAM. As you can see, it's very, very, very choppy. It only scores 706, which is very low for this APU. Here in comparison are some other various cards and APUs as well. The 4750G is highlighted in green here, just from the previous video. But you can see where the 4350 should be sitting, and that's in comparison with some various graphics cards and Time Spy. So obviously it's slower than the 4750G, but that's what you're supposed to get with faster RAM. Now here's Final Fantasy XV. It's going to be a similar story throughout. Here it is with 2400 MHz RAM in single channel mode. We are barely getting into double digits here. It is absolutely dire, which isn't a shock. But with 3200 MHz RAM, you should be expecting to get much better performance with this. But that just shows how slow it is. Here it is with the faster RAM, so 3200 MHz, and with various other things such as the 4750 and various graphics cards. So you can see that the RAM is very important when it comes to the APU, but also dual channel mode. And here again is Final Fantasy XIV. Similar issue, barely double digits at 2400, and it's not a shock. So we scored 2233 in Final Fantasy XIV with the 2400 MHz, and with 3600 it scores over 5500. So that's the night and day difference, really. And once again, you can see where the 4350G should sit in comparison to various other graphics cards, and you can see the performance difference. Now, Call of Duty Warzone, this is with once again the 8GB and 2400. I really struggled to get this game to run on this configuration. There was a lot of messing around and a lot of fiddling. As you can see, it's getting an average of 35 FPS. This is on everything low with bots, running it pretty much 720p internal resolution. So it looks dire, and it's just about getting 30 FPS average. So with the faster RAM, it's much better. So on the same settings, here's 16GB with 3200 MHz RAM. We are getting nearly 60 FPS average.
The upper right part of your HUD shows how many enemies remain. Gas is inbound.
Shows a comparison. Here is the same game with the GTX 1650, because this was one of the games that was requested for this machine. And this is all on medium, so it's getting average of 76 FPS. So you can see the CPU is not holding this machine back, and an upgrade to a 1650 is well within its limits.
Gas is closing in. That's gas. It will kill you. Taking fire. Only 2 left.
Now the assumption might be that older games should run fine with this amount of RAM. Here is Alien Isolation, and as you can see, this is on Ultra, so it's on the high settings. It is struggling to hit 30 FPS, it's averaging about 32, which isn't ideal at all. I mean, it's playable for this game, but it's really holding the APU back, it's really struggling. And here's the same settings with 3200 MHz RAM. As you can see, now we're getting 60 FPS, so the RAM really does make a difference in certain games, no matter how old.
An access to. She was trying to hack the elevator's security. Circuits are fried. Easy.
Now another game that was requested for this machine here is Minecraft, running with the 8GB 2400 MHz. Of course, being Minecraft, granted this is the trial Java version, it runs fine. We get an average of 86 FPS. It's not holding it back at all, but you would not expect that for Minecraft really. So that's absolutely fine. But as we switch to the faster RAM, as you can see, we're getting a similar kind of average, but you're getting slightly higher maxes. So it runs just a little bit smoother. Here we're getting averages around about the mid-90s after running around for a bit. So the RAM here doesn't make a massive difference. It's not really that that's holding it back. It's more the, well, it's more the actual game itself, because you can see the GPU and CPU are not being stressed at all. And here we have a game I like playing a lot, which is Apex Legends. Here's 8GB 2400 MHz RAM. Just remember it's got 2GB dedicated because I couldn't really add any more. It's using pretty much all the RAM here. CPU is idling pretty much, not idling, but it's not being stressed. GPU is being stressed a lot, and the RAM is really holding it back. We're only getting about 30 average, which isn't really playable for this game, especially when you get these low dips and there's a lot of stuff going on. Now, here is it with a 16GB on 3200 MHz. Same settings, all on low. And here we're getting an average of 46, so much more playable, much smoother, much better dips. Nothing really goes below 30, so much better. Here is Tomb Raider running on Ultra. This is with the slow RAM again. As you can see, we are struggling to get the 30 FPS here, so we're getting 28 average, so it really is console performance. So it is chugging along. Our GPU is stressed out again, and the RAM is really holding it back. CPU is basically idling. With the 16GB at 3200 MHz, we're getting an average around about the mid 50s, so it's much better. Once again, the CPU is still idling, it's not doing a lot. Our GPU is maxed out, but we've almost doubled the frames again just by increasing the RAM speed. Here's Portal 2, of course, very old game at this point. Runs very well pretty much on everything because it's the source engine. We're getting an average around 79, 80 with the slow RAM, which isn't great. With the faster RAM, as you can see, we're in the 200 FPS in certain areas, and we're probably getting an average around 150, so the RAM was really holding it back once again. Now, if you're considering buying something like this for the purpose of gaming, you need to be well aware that RAM is terrible. You need to swap it out immediately because the game performance is dire. It's GT710, well, it's obviously better than GT710, but it's that kind of level of performance. It is pretty awful. So at that point, swap the RAM out, get more of it, get faster RAM. 3200 MHz is fine. I wouldn't go any faster than that, just because trying to put faster RAM into these kind of machines, like say 3600 MHz, you can have a bit of a pain trying to get it set up if you don't know what you're doing. So stick with 3200 MHz, you'll have a much better time. But overall, this machine is a great machine for a base gaming machine. Just watch that PSU, but other than that, it's pretty good. CPU will be absolutely fine for most games coming up. I can't see anything taking more advantage of more than 8 threads at the moment. Maybe in a couple of years, maybe, but not at the moment. But at least you can upgrade the machine because it is an AM4 socket, and it does have the B550M chipset, so you can get to a Ryzen 5000. So that's all good. So overall, this machine's performance is pretty good overall for the price that you pay for it. So if you want to pick one of these up for gaming, go ahead, do it. It's a good deal. Buy a GPU later, replace that RAM, and keep an eye on the PSU. And that's all I want to say about this machine today. So I better go set this up and deliver it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. So goodbye.